You ever walk into one of those huge, modern buildings and just wonder, how does it all work? How is the temperature always just right? The lights are on exactly when you need them, and everything just feels seamless. Well, it turns out there's this invisible intelligence humming away behind the scenes, kind of like a digital nervous system running right through the walls. So today, let's pull back the curtain and see how these buildings actually think.
So yeah, that's the big question, right? How does a skyscraper, or really any large building, think? How does it make all those tiny decisions that keep thousands of people comfortable and safe, while also being incredibly efficient with energy? The answer is this amazing piece of technology that's literally all around us, but most of us have never even heard of it.
Okay, so before we get to the solution, you've got to understand the problem. And honestly, the problem is just chaos. A modern building isn't really one single thing. It's more like a collection of dozens of separate, sometimes competing systems all running at the same time. I mean, just think about everything that's going on. You've got the HVAC system trying to keep things cool, but at the same time, the lighting grid is generating heat. Then you have security doors, fire alarms, elevators, water pumps, and they're all kind of operating in their own little bubbles. Without some kind of central command, it's just really inefficient, super wasteful, and unbelievably complicated to manage.
So how do you tame all that chaos? Well, it's simple. You give the building a brain, and that brain has a name. It's called a building management system, or BMS for short. This is the really elegant, intelligent solution that brings order to all those disconnected parts.
So what is it exactly? Well, a BMS is basically a super sophisticated computer-based control system, and it really has two main goals, right there in the definition. First, use as little energy as possible, and second, keep all the people inside totally comfortable and productive. It is the ultimate multitasker.
Remember that whole chaotic list from before? A BMS completely transforms it. It doesn't just run the systems, it orchestrates them, like a conductor with an orchestra. It's constantly monitoring everything, it's beefing up security, it's slashing energy bills, it's analyzing data to find new ways to improve, and it even helps crazy expensive equipment last longer by running it smarter.
Okay, that all sounds fantastic, right? But how does this brain actually get information and make all these smart decisions? How does it know that a room is empty or that the weather outside is changing? Let's get into the mechanics of it.
It really boils down to this super simple but powerful three-step loop. First, the system will sense the environment. It does this with a whole network of sensors checking temperature, motion, light, you name it. Then it thinks. Little computers called controllers process all that data against a set of rules. And finally, it acts. It sends commands out to the physical hardware to make a change, like lowering a shade or adjusting a fan. Sense, think, act. Over and over every second of the day.
And we can break that whole process down into three main levels. At the very bottom, you have the field level. Think of this as the system's eyes, ears, and hands, all the sensors gathering data and all the actuators making things happen. In the middle, you've got the automation level. This is where the direct digital controllers, or DDCs, live. These are the little brains of the operation doing all the thinking. And then at the top, you've got the management level, which is where humans can see it all on a dashboard and take control if they need to.
Of course, for all these different pieces of gear from different companies to work together, they've got to speak the same language. That's where communication protocols come in. Things with names like BACnet or Modbus. You can just think of them as the universal translators for the building, making sure every single component can understand every other component, no problem.
All right, so that's the how. Now for the really fun part, the why. What are the actual benefits of giving a building this kind of intelligence? What are its real-world superpowers?
As you can see, the applications are pretty wide-ranging, but they tend to focus on the biggest systems. HVAC and lighting are just huge energy hogs, so naturally they're the first things you'd want to optimize. And of course, tying security and fire safety into one intelligent system just makes everyone a whole lot safer.
Let's just take HVAC, for example, because this is where it gets really clever. A smart BMS uses occupancy sensors. So if it knows a conference room is going to be empty for the next few hours, it's not going to waste a single dime keeping it at a perfect 72 degrees. It adjusts based on what's actually happening, in real time, not just based on some dumb timer.
And the result of all that smart adjustment is, well, it's dramatic. This is the payoff. A building with a good BMS can see massive drops in energy use compared to a traditional one. We're talking serious cost savings, sometimes as much as 15 to 30%, and a way smaller carbon footprint. It's a win for the accountants and a win for the planet.
But wait, it gets even smarter. A BMS can basically use data to predict the future. By watching performance trends, it can spot an air conditioning unit that's about to fail before it actually breaks down on the hottest day of the summer. That's called predictive maintenance, and believe me, it saves a ton of money and a ton of headaches.
Now, this isn't some kind of science fiction. This is a massive global industry. So who are the companies that are actually out there designing and building these digital brains for our buildings? Well, you're looking at some of the real titans of the industry right here. Companies like Johnson Controls, Siemens, Schneider Electric, and Honeywell, they've been developing these incredibly complex systems for years. Each one has its own powerful platform that's making our buildings smarter, safer, and way more efficient. So, when you boil it all down, the most important point is this. A building management system fundamentally changes what a building is. It transforms it from just a passive, static pile of concrete and steel into a dynamic, living ecosystem that actually responds to its occupants and the world around it in real time. Which leaves us with one last, pretty mind-bending question. Now that our buildings have brains, and with all the advances in AI and the Internet of Things, what are they gonna dream of next? What new levels of efficiency, of comfort, of intelligence are just around the corner? That's definitely something to think about the next time you walk into a skyscraper.